Oh, hello, great readers. I'm Bill Chan.
I'm Nimacum.
I'm Van Chan.
In this class, I'll read to all of you a part of Ulysses,
Bess,
L.
Ulysses, James Joyce. Chap 1667. Have a shot at it now. He ventured to say of the coffee after being stirred. This prevailed unto at any rate taste as Stephen lifted the heavy mug from. The bran puddle clopped out of one taken up by the handle and took a sip of the offending beverage. Still it's solid food. His good genius urged. I'm a stickler for solid food. His one and only reason being not gormandising in the least but regular meals as the sine qua non for any kind of proper work. Mental or manual. You would eat more solid food. You would feel a different man. Liquids I can eat, Stephen said. But oblige me by taking away that knife. I can't look at the point of it. It reminds me of Roman history. Mr. Bloom promptly did as suggested and removed the incriminated article. A blunt iron-handled ordinary knife with nothing particularly Roman or antique about it to the lay. Observing that the point was the least conspicuous point about it. Our mutual friend's stories are like himself. Mr. Bloom apropos of knives remarked to his confidantes at Ovos. Do you think they are genuine? He could spin those yarns for hours on end all night long and lie like old boots. Look at him. He had stood though his eyes were thick with sleep and see life was full of a host of things and coincidences of a terrible nature, and it was quite within the bounds of possibility that it was not an entire fabrication though at first. Thus there was not much in here in probability in all the spiff he got off his chest being strictly accurate gospel. He had been meantime taking stock of the individual in front of him and Sherlock Holmesing him up ever since he clapped eyes on him. Though a well-preserved man of no little stamina, if a trifle prone to boldness, there was something spurious in the cut of his jib that suggested a jail delivery, and it required no violent stretch of imagination to associate such a wide-looking specimen with the Oakham and Treadmill fraternity. He might even have done for his man, supposing it was his own case he told, as people often did about others, namely, that he killed him himself and had served his 4 or 5 good-looking years in durance vile, to say nothing of the Antonio personage, no relation to the dramatic personage of identical name who sprang from the pen of our national poet who expiated his crimes in the melodramatic manner above described. On the other hand, he might be only bluffing. I pardonable weakness because meeting unmistakable mugs. Dublin residents, like those Jarvies waiting news from abroad, would tempt any ancient mariner who sailed the ocean seas to draw the long bow about the schooner Hesperus and etc. And when all was said and done, the lies a fellow told about himself couldn't probably hold a proverbial candle to the wholesale whoppers that their fellows coined about him. Mind you, I'm not saying that it's all a pure invention. He resumed. Analogous scenes are occasionally if not often, met with giants, though that is rather a far cry. You see once in a way, Masla the Midget Queen. In those waxworks in Henry Street I myself saw some Aztecs, as they are called, sitting bull out. They couldn't straighten their legs if you paid them because the muscles here. You see, he proceeded, indicating on his companion the brief outline of the signs or whatever you like to call them behind the right knee, were utterly perilous from sitting that way so long cramped up, being adored as gods. There is an example again of simple souls. However, reverting to friend Sinbad and his horrifying adventures, who reminded him a bit of Ludwig, alias Ludwig, when he occupied the boards of the Getty when Michael Gung was identified with the management in the Flying Dutchman. A stupendous success, and his host of admirers came in large numbers, everyone simply flocking to hear him, no ships of any sort, phantom or the reverse. On the stage usually fell a bit flat, as also did trains. There was nothing intrinsically incompatible about it, he conceded. On the contrary, that stab in the back touch was quite in keeping with those Italianos, though candidly he was nonetheless free to admit those as the creamers and friars in the fish way, not to mention the chip potato variety and so forth over. And little Italy there near the Coombe was sober, thrifty, hard-working fellows, except perhaps but too given to pothenting the harmless necessary animal of the feline persuasion of others. At night so as to have a good old succulent tuck in with garlic de rigueur. Often more her next day on the quiet end. He added, on the cheap. Spaniards, for instance, he continued. Passionate temperaments like that, impetuous as Old Nick, are given to taking the law into their own hands and give you a quietus. Devil cook with those poignards they carry in the abdomen. It comes from the great heat, climate generally. My wife is, so to speak, Spanish. How that is. Point of fact, she could actually claim Spanish nationality if she wanted, having been born in technically Spain, i.e. Gibraltar. She has the Spanish type. Quite dark. Regular brunette. Black. I for one certainly believe climate accounts for character. That's why I asked you if you wrote your poetry in Italian. The temperaments at the door, Stephen interposed with, were very passionate about 10 shillings. Roberto Rubarobasu. Quite so, Mr. Bloom told. Then, Stephen said, stirring and rambling on to himself or some unknown listener somewhere, we have the impetuosity of Dante and the isosceles triangle Miss Portinari he fell in love with, and Leonardo and St. Thomas and Mastino. It's in the blood. Mr. Bloom acceded at once. All are washed in the blood of the sun. Coincidence, I just happened to be in the Cutter Street Museum today, shortly prior to our meeting, if I can so call it, and I was just looking at those antique statues there. the splendid proportions of hips. But you simply don't knock against those kind of women here. An exception here and there. And some, yes. Pretty in a way you find, but what I'm talking about is the female form. Besides, they have so little taste in dress. Most of them. Which greatly enhances a woman's natural beauty. No matter what you say. Wampled stockings. It may be. Possibly is. A fibble of mine, but still it's a thing I simply hate to see. Interest, however, was starting to flag somewhat all round, and then the others got onto talking about accidents at sea, ships lost in a fog, collisions with icebergs, all that sort of thing. Shiphow, of course, had his own say to say. He had doubled the Cape a few times and weathered a monsoon. A kind of wind. In the China seas and through all those pearls of the deep there was one. Then, he declared, stitium or words to that effect. A pice medal he had that saved him. So then after that they drifted onto the wreck of Dance Rock. Wreck of that of fated Norwegian wreck when nobody could think of her name for the moment. To the Jarvey, who had really quite a look of Henry Campbell, remembered it Pommy. On Booterstown Strand. That was the talk of the town that year. Albert William Cole wrote a fine piece of original verse of distinctive merit on the topic for the Irish Times. Breakers running over her in crowds and crowds on the shore in commotion, petrified with horror. Then someone said something about the case of this. Lady Cairns of Swansea run into by the Mona, which was on an opposite tack. Then Rilla McGeish with her end lost with all hands on deck. No aid was given. Her master, the Monas, said he was afraid his collision bulkhead would give way. She had no water, it appears, in her hold. At this stage an incident happened. It having become necessary for him to unfurl, the sailor vacated his seat. "Let me cross your bows, mate," he said to his neighbour, who was just gently dropping off into a peaceful doze. He made tracks heavily, slowly with a dumpy sort of a gait to the door, stepped heavily down the one step there was out of the shelter and bore due. While he was in the act of getting his bearings, Mr. Bloom, he noticed one. He stood up that he had 2 flasks of presumably ship's rum sticking one out of each pocket for the private consumption of his burning interior. Saw him produce a bottle and then cork it or unscrewed, applying its nozzle to his lips. Take a good old delectable swig out of it with a gurgling noise. The irrepressible Bloom, who also had a shrewd suspicion that the old stager went out on a manoeuvre, after the counter-attraction in the shape of a female who however had disappeared to all intents and purposes, could by straining just perceive him, when duly refreshed by his repugnant exploit, gaping up at the piers and girders of the loop line rather out of his depths. Of course, it was all ridiculously altered since his last visit and greatly improved. Some person or persons invisible directed him to the mill urinal erected by the cleansing committee all over the place for the purpose but after a brief space of time, during which silence reigned supreme, the sailor, evidently giving it a wide berth, eased himself closer at hand, the noise of his budgewaiter some little time subsequently splashing on the ground where it apparently awoke a horse of the cab rank. I'd have scooped anyway for Newford hold after sleep and harness jingled. Slightly disturbed in his centre box by the brazier of live coke, the watcher of the corporation stone through, though now broken down and fast breaking up, was none other in stern reality than the gummy aforesaid, now practically on the parish rates, given the temporary job by Pat Tubbing in all human probability from dictates of humanity, knowing him before shifted about and shuffled in his box before composing his limbs again into the arms of Morpheus, a truly amazing piece of hard lines in its most virulent form on a pillow, most respectably connected and familiarist with decent home comforts all his life he came in, for a coal 100 a year at one time, which of course the dabble world as proceeded to make general ducks and drakes of. And there he was at the end of his tether after having often painted that Tanto Irby Pigwad a beggarly starver. He drank needless to be told, and it pointed only once more moral then. He might quite easily be in a large way of business if a big if, however, had contrived to cure himself of his particular partiality. All meantime were loudly lamenting the filling off in Irish shipping, coastwise and Fern as well, which was all part and parcel of the same thing. A Palgrave Murphy boat was put off the ways at Alexandra Basin, the only launch that year. Right enough the harbours were there only no ships ever called. To be continued.